Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I'll be reading from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, published in 1876 by Mark Twain. It's set in 1840 along the Mississippi River near the town of Hannibal, where Twain grew up. I do readings twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, so this will take 10 weeks total, and we're about halfway through now. If you subscribe to my Substack newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Last chapter, Tom still had failed to win Becky back, and somehow she's angrier than ever with him now. Chapter 19. Tom arrived at home in a dreary mood, and the first thing his aunt said to him showed him that he had brought his sorrows to an unpromising market. "Tom, I've a notion to skin you alive." "Auntie, well, what have I done?" "Well, you've done enough. Here I go over to Serenity Harper like an old softy, expecting I'm going to make her believe all that rubbish about that dream, and lo and behold, she'd found out from Joe you was over there and heard all the talk we had that night. Tom, I don't know what it is to become a boy that'll act like that. Makes me feel so bad to think you could let me go to Serenity Harper. I make such a fool of myself and never say a word." This was a new aspect of the thing. His smartness in the morning had seemed to Tom a good joke before, and very ingenious. It merely looked mean and shabby now. He hung his head and could not think of anything to say for a moment, and then he said, "Auntie, I wish I hadn't done it, but I didn't think." "Oh, child, you never think. You never think of anything but your own selfishness. You could think to come all the way over here from Jackson's Island in the middle of the night to laugh at our troubles, and you could think to fool me with a lie about a dream, but you couldn't ever think to pity us and save us from sorrow." "Auntie, I know now it was mean. I didn't mean to be mean. I didn't, honest. Besides, I didn't come over here to laugh at you that night." "Oh, what did you come for, then?" "It was to tell you not to be uneasy about us because we hadn't got drowned." Tom, I would be the thankfulest soul in the world if I could believe you ever had as good a thought as that, but you know you never did, and I know it, Tom." "Well, indeed I did, Auntie. I wish I would never stir if I didn't." "Oh, Tom, don't lie. Don't do it. It only makes things 100 times worse." "It ain't a lie, Auntie. It's the truth. I wanted to keep you from grieving. That's all that made me come." "I'd give the whole world to believe that. It would cover up a power of sins, Tom. I'd most be glad you'd run off and had it so bad, but it ain't reasonable because, why didn't you tell me, child?" "Well, you see, when you got to talking about the funeral, I just got all full of the idea of our coming and hiding in the church, and I couldn't somehow bear to spoil it. So I just put the bark back in my pocket and I kept mum." "What bark?" "The bark I wrote on to tell you we'd gone pirating. I wish now you'd waked up when I kissed you. I do, honest." The hard lines in his aunt's face relaxed, and a sudden tenderness dawned in her eyes. "Did you kiss me, Tom?" "Oh, yes, I did." "Are you sure you did, Tom?" "Why, yes, I did, Auntie. Certain sure." "What did you kiss me for, Tom?" "Because I loved you so, and you lay there moaning, and I was so sorry." The words sounded like truth, and the old lady could not hide a tremor in her voice when she said, well, kiss me again, Tom, and be off with you to school now, and don't bother me any more." The moment he was gone, she ran to the closet and got out the ruin of a jacket which Tom had gone pirating in, and then she stopped with it in her hand and said to herself, No, don't dare. Poor boy, I reckon he's lied about it, but it's a blessed, blessed lie. There's such a comfort come from it. I know the Lord will forgive him, because it was such good heartness in him to tell it, but I don't want to find out it's a lie. I won't look." She put the jacket away and stood by, musing a minute. Twice she put out her hand to take the garment again, and twice she refrained. Once more she ventured, and this time she fortified herself with the thought, "It's a good lie. It's a good lie. I won't let it grieve me." So she sought the jacket pocket. A moment later, she was reading Tom's piece of bark through flowing tears and saying, "Oh, I could forgive the boy now if he'd committed 1,000,000 sins." End of chapter. Chapter 20. There was something about Aunt Polly's manner when she kissed Tom that swept away his low spirits and made him light-hearted and happy again. He started to school and had the luck of coming upon Becky Thatcher at the head of Meadow Lane. His mood always determined his manner. Without a moment's hesitation, he ran up to her and said, I acted mighty mean today, Becky, and I'm so sorry. I won't ever do that way again, as long as I ever live. Please make up, won't you? The girl stopped and looked at him scornfully in the face. I'll thank you to keep to yourself, Mr. Thomas Sawyer. I'll never speak to you again. She tossed her head and passed on. Tom was so stunned he had not even the presence of mind to say, Who cares, Miss Smarty? And until the right time to say it had gone by. So he said nothing. But he was in a fine rage nevertheless. He moped into the schoolyard and wished she were a boy and imagined how he could trounce her if she were. He presently encountered her and delivered a stinging remark as he passed, and she hurled one in return, and the angry breach was complete. It seemed to Becky, in her hot resentment, that she could hardly wait for school to take in. She was so impatient to see Tom flogged for the injured spelling book. If she had any lingering notion of exposing Alfred Temple, Tom's offensive fling had driven it entirely away. Poor girl, she did not know how fast she was nearing trouble herself. The master, Mr. Dobbins, had reached middle age with an unsatisfied ambition. The darling of his desires was to be a doctor, but poverty had decreed he should be nothing higher than a village schoolmaster. Every day he took a mysterious book out of his desk and absorbed himself in it at times when no classes were reciting. He kept that book under lock and key. There was not an urchin in the school but was perishing to have a glimpse to it, but the chance never came. Every boy and girl had a theory about the nature of that book, but no two theories were alike, and there was no way of getting at the facts in the case. Now, as Becky was passing by the desk, which stood near the door, she noticed that the key was in the lock. It was a precious moment. She glanced around, found herself alone, and the next instant she had the book in her hands. The title page, Professor Somebody's Anatomy, carried no information to her mind, so she began to turn the leaves. She came at once upon a handsomely engraved and colored frontispiece, a human figure stark naked. At that moment a shadow fell on the page, and Tom Sawyer stepped in at the door and caught a glimpse of the picture. Becky snatched at the book to close it and had the hard luck to tear the pictured page half down the middle. She thrust the volume into the desk, turned the key, and burst out crying with shame and vexation. Tom Sawyer, you're just as mean as you can be to sneak up on a person and look what they're looking at. How could I know you was looking at anything? You ought to be ashamed of yourself, Tom Sawyer. You know you're going to tell on me, and, what shall I do? What shall I do? I'll be whipped, and I never was whipped in school. Then she stamped her little foot and said, Be so mean if you want to. I know something that's going to happen. You just wait and you'll see. Hateful, hateful, hateful. And she flung out of the house with a new explosion of crying. Tom stood still, rather flustered by this onslaught, but presently he said to himself, What a curious kind of fool a girl is. Never been licked in school. Shucks, what's a licking? That's just like a girl. They're so thin-skinned and chicken-hearted. Well, of course, I ain't going to tell old Dobbins on this little fool, because there's other ways of getting even on her. They ain't so mean. What of it? Old Dobbins will ask who it was tore his book, and nobody'll answer, and then he'll do just the way he always does, ask first one and then the other, and when he comes to the right girl, he'll know it without any telling. Girls' faces always tell on 'em. They ain't got any backbone. She'll get licked. Well, it's a kind of a tight place for Becky Thatcher, because there ain't any way out of it. Tom conned the thing a moment longer and then added, All right, though. She'd like to see me in just a fix. Let her sweat it out. Tom joined the mob of skylarking scholars outside. In a few moments, the master arrived and school took in. Tom did not feel a strong interest in his studies, and every time he stole a glance at the girl's side of the room, Becky's face troubled him. Considering all things, he did not want to pity her, and yet it was all he could do to help it. He could get up no exultation that was really worthy the name. Presently, the spelling book's discovery was made, and Tom's mind was entirely full of his own matters for a while after that. Becky roused up from her lethargy and distress and showed good interest in the proceedings. She did not expect that Tom could get out of his trouble by denying that he spilt the ink on the book himself, and she was right. The denial only seemed to make the thing worse for Tom. Becky supposed she'd be glad of that, and she tried to believe she was glad of it, but she found she was not certain. When the worst came to the worst, she had an impulse to get up and tell on Alfred Temple, but she made an effort and forced herself to keep still because, as she said to herself, well, he'll tell about me tearing the picture, sure. I won't say a word, not to save his life. Tom took his whipping and went back to his seat, not at all broken-hearted, for he thought it was possible he had unknowingly upset the ink on the spelling book himself in some skylarking bout. He had denied it for form's sake and because it was custom, and had stuck to the denial from principle. A whole hour drifted by, and the master sat nodding in his throne. The air was drowsy with the hum of study. By and by, Mr. Dobbins straightened himself up, yawned, and then unlocked his desk and reached for his book, but seemed undecided whether to take it out or leave it. Most of the pupils glanced up languidly, but there were two among them who watched his movements with intent eyes. Mr. Dobbins fingered his book absently for a while and took it out and sat himself in his chair to read. Tom shot a glance at Becky. He had seen a hunted and helpless rabbit look as she did with a gun leveled at its head. Instantly he forgot his quarrel with her. Oh, quick, something must be done in a flash, too. But the very imminence of the emergency paralyzed his invention. Oh, good, he had an inspiration. He would run and snatch the book, spring through the air and fly, but his resolution shook for one little instant, and the chance was lost. The master opened the volume. If only Tom had that wasted opportunity back again. Too late. There was no help for Becky now, he said. The next moment the master faced the school. Every eye sank under his gaze. There was that in it which smote even the innocent with fear. There was silence while one might count 10. The master was gathering his wrath. Then he spoke. Who tore this book? There was not a sound. One could have heard a pin drop. The stillness continued. The master searched face after face for signs of guilt. Benjamin Rogers, did you tear this book? A denial, another pause. Joseph Harper, did you? Another denial. Tom's uneasiness grew more and more intense under the slow torture of these proceedings. The master scanned the ranks of boys, considered a while, and turned to the girls. Amy Lawrence, shake of the head. Gracie Miller, the same sign. Susan Harper, did you do this? Another negative. The next girl was Becky Thatcher. Tom was trembling from head to foot with excitement and a sense of the hopelessness of the situation. Rebecca Thatcher. Tom glanced at her face. It was white with terror. Did you tear? No, look me in the face. Her hands arose in appeal. Did you tear this book? A thought shot like lightning through Tom's brain. He sprang to his feet and shouted, I done it. The school stared in perplexity at this incredible folly. Tom stood a moment to gather his dismembered faculties, and when he stepped forward to go to his punishment, the surprise, the gratitude, the adoration that shone upon him out of poor Becky's eyes seemed to pay enough for 100 floggings. Inspired by the splendor of his own act, he took without an outcry the most merciless flaying that even Mr. Dobbins had ever administered, and also received in indifference the added cruelty of a command to remain 2 hours after school, for he knew who would wait for him outside till his captivity was done, and not count the tedious time as loss either. Tom went to bed that night planning vengeance against Alfred Temple, for with shame and repentance Becky had told him all, not forgetting her own treachery, but even the longing for vengeance had to give way soon to pleasanter musings, and he fell asleep at last with Becky's last words lingering dreamily in his ear. Tom, how could you be so noble? End of chapter. Finally, back in Becky's good books. Hopefully he can stay there a while, but he is a young boy and unaware of the complexities of relationships. Remember to let me know what your preferences are for readings, and if you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack at ravensview.substack.com, and remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.